All right, folks, let's jump right in. We're gonna have a eager early start today. We got Jay Shiggity in the chat, Red Octane, T Breezy. We got Gigi's in here. Gigi says he has to dip out though. Thank you for submitting your beat nonetheless, Gigi. Let me know if the mic is sounding good. If so, we'll just jump right into the wheel. Hopefully you guys are having a good Sunday. So this assignment was something I don't think we've done before, maybe something similar, where you guys are going to make a beat, and I'm just forcing you to start in a different way. Typically, you know, most people, whenever I run those polls, most people start with either the chords or the melody. Mic is sounding good. Thank you, Red Octane. Yeah, so most people start with chords or a melody, so I just want to force you guys to start your beat a different way, just because whenever I've done that and forced myself to use a different type of sound, the outcomes can be very drastically different than had I started however I typically do. So let's quickly do an audio test. Let me know if this is sounding good. Let me know if audio's coming through. If so, we'll jump right in. Good to see that you guys are having productive weekends. Jay Shiggity said he put his hands on about 5 beats yesterday. That's never happened before. That's a large amount of beats. Wasn't too productive, says T Breezy. We all have those days. Not a fan of your own beat. Sounds great. Audio's good. All right. Let's just get in there. Jay Shiggity says, I promised myself I would dig into old unfinished loops. It's been fruitful. Yeah, I've never had that process or flow in my own beat making career. I usually find myself deleting anything and everything that I just don't complete. Not that I'm saying that's the right thing to do. I just like the idea personally of just like exploring new ideas. And whenever I come across something old, I just find for me it doesn't really ignite the juices like a new idea does. But that's probably also why I don't spend as much time doing the other parts of beat making outside of like starting new ideas. Anyways, let's just go ahead and jump into the wheel here. Yeah, before we get started, hopefully you guys are having a good Sunday and you guys made a beat that you're at least somewhat happy with. So much lost gold. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some ideas that could have gone somewhere, but I guess for me, it's all about like the long-term perspective of whatever keeps me motivated the most. And if I don't have as much fun using older loops that I've already sort of pre-built, it's just not going to be as fun going forward. I guess that's my thinking. Anyways, let's just go ahead and spin. Well, yeah, I explained the assignment this week. There's going to be one more assignment in March that we'll be doing 2 weeks. And then for April, we'll be doing the entire month for the upcoming spring Better Beatmaker contest. So once again, cash prizes, all that good stuff. I had my one-on-one with Dion, the last winner, and hopefully he enjoyed it. That's pretty much it. So let's just go ahead and listen to some beats. I don't think there's anything else to announce or anything else. So let's go. Spin this wheel, baby. We've got T Breezy, first one up, who's in the chat. Good job, T Breezy, on being selected. I believe you mentioned you're not too hot on your beat. It says beat not finished in the actual description. But nonetheless, let's just take a listen to the beat. All right, guys, I'm gonna turn the volume back up. So turn your volume on your interface down, please. 3, 2, 1. All right, so back to full volume. Let's see what you guys are saying here in the chat. I like how the guitar and hi-hat are in lockstep. Maybe you run with that and add pauses or dips to the rhythm. This is the first beat, Crowtown. Yes, definitely a quiet beat, but also not finished. So that's a super simple fix. I like all the instrumentation in it. It feels like it worked well together. There's something about the static hats that bother me a bit. Could be taste though, says Crowtown. Good vibes though. Yeah, so I think with this beat, obviously T Breezy mentioned that it was an incomplete beat, but I think the idea is there, the sort of core idea of the sort of guitar beat. I'm interested in how like the assignment was meant to force you guys to start with a percussive loop and then add a bass line, and my hope was, GG says, I like the pattern, very catchy. The supporting instrument behind works really well. So the idea was that you guys would make a little bit more of like an intricate bass line, probably to fill up more room, and then the instrumentation typically beyond that of like whatever sound you use, pianos, blah blah blah, would be a little bit more stripped down, just because the percussive loop plus ideally the intricate bass line would fill up a lot of room in the beat. But the way that both of those textures were used in this beat were very minimal, so it sounds like the percussive loop was pitched way down and sort of pushed in the back, and the 808 or the bass pattern was a simple, just like a one note pattern every just 2 or 4 bars or so, and most of the complexity came from the instrumentation. So outside of like what my expectation was, I think the instrumentation, what was built with the guitar here, was great. I mean, it sounds like a really intricate pattern. You have this sort of trap hi-hats. Yeah, I think all the major ingredients in the beat were present for the most part. I think all that would probably be needed to make this beat sound a little bit more full would be to add, maybe a little kick pattern, add a few more bass notes just so you have more than just one note hitting at the very beginning of your bar every 2 or 4 bars or so, creating something that's a little bit more intricate. But beyond that, I think you have everything you need to make a sort of core full idea here. It's a little bit hard to hear. Once again, I don't want to crank the volume. Yeah, so we just have that one 808 at the beginning of every bar, it sounds like. So just creating like a little bit more of a melodic pattern there that follows the guitar a little bit. I think all the spaces in the beat for the most part are full. You used the sounds in an interesting way. Like I mentioned, you took that percussive loop, and it sounds like you pitched it down to fill up like the low mid. The guitar has a nice amount of reverb on it, so that's sitting, filling up the depth in the sort of middle and background, along with the claps. So I think it's just like the core drums that were missing a little bit. But Red Octane says the arrangement was good as well, in my opinion. Quite simple, but would be great for an artist. Yeah, that's the sort of feeling I got too. I think just the sort of additional notes and a kick maybe could have helped the beat come together. But yeah, interesting that I wonder if like you took the assignment and you really forced your own idea once again, just because the assignment's intention was to like really force you guys to rethink how you start a beat. And it sounds like with how intricate the guitar pattern is, maybe T Breezy typically likes to make sort of these guitar trap type beats, and really forced the assignment to sort of go into his wheelhouse, which isn't a bad thing by any means, but I think it can be really valuable to force yourself to stay within the confines of like what the hope is for the assignment, and really force yourself to learn that way. Yeah, I think that's my takeaway with T Breezy's beat here. Not quite as unfinished as I thought. Just a few more sounds would have been necessary, and obviously, the volume's quite low, so just maximizing, putting something on the master to really squeeze and compress, so everything can be a little bit more. You can hear a little bit more of the beat would have been nice as well. Let's spin it up. Here we have, the wheel's getting a little bit dramatic. We got Cora's beat up next. Let's see what Cora's got for us. There you are. Let's take a listen to this beat, which will be full volume, I assume. right, that was Cora's beat Seismic. Let's close this down. Let's highlight your name. Whoopsies. John Sherby's here. How's it going? I'm sorry to hear about what's happening. So that's the Silicon Bank Valley thing that's been happening. That's some wild stuff that's happening there. The different distortion levels of the 808 is super nice. Love the bass. This goes super hard. That B section was right on the money. NDN man, how's it going? Good to see you. The percussion loop is nasty. Love the aggressive bass line. Great 808s. Love the movement on this. Great sounds. Wish you the best. That's very nice. I agree. Wish you the best too, John Sherby. Phantom is here. Love the hits and the feel of the beat. The main rhythm is smooth. Nice transitions with the sounds. This B line melody is so catchy, says Jay Shiggity. So yeah, I definitely agree with this beat. So the thing that jumped out first off was a really, really cool percussion loop that really did a good job of filling up space, and you could hear Cora sort of minimize how much of the outside percussive elements like the typical hi-hats they really minimized, just because so much of that void was filled with that percussion loop. The 808 pattern, again, really, really interesting and awesome as well. It's got a lot of musicality to it, and I think that also went a long way in just adding a lot more to the beat. What I really liked about the beat was it sort of reminded me of like, it's almost like a funk beat where the cowbell is replaced with that initial synth, like the synth here. Like I can see this being the exact type of funk beat that we hear if that synth was replaced by a cowbell, just because the pattern is, you know, very similar, very like arpeggiating, very melodic and rhythmic. So yeah, really awesome sound selection, really cool bass line. I don't really have much to say in terms of like a negative here. You did a good job of creating an A and B section, so the beat never felt boring. The switch up that you did with the sounds was on point as well, where we have, again, this synthetic sound that's very fast paced and like a lot of rhythm to it and a lot of musicality. And then when you do the switch up, the sound is a bit different, but a lot of the properties are the same, where it doesn't feel jarring going from one section to another. So this is something I talk about in the course, where if you want to sort of change the sounds in your arrangement, it can really help to keep a consistency with the other types of characteristics. So with this sound here, we went from this synth sound here to this other synth sound, which they have a lot of similar characteristics in how the patterns are built and what spaces they take up. A little bit of a different frequency difference and a shape difference, but other than that, that's why those two sections felt very fluid. So sick work, so much going on, but it's all fitting so well. Such a good sound. Yeah, I really like this sort of Memphis feel here. I was listening to some old Memphis beats before this, and yeah, it's really connected with me. I really like this. I don't really have much negative to say here, Cora. I think you did a great job with this assignment, and happy to hear you making good beats. Yeah, great job of like dropping instrumentation, dropping the drums, putting the small little variations here and there. Just kept the beat interesting. That was well done. Here we go. Next up, we've got Joe the Stickman. Joe is... I don't think I saw him in the chat today so far, but let's take a listen to his beat here.
Little stick man.
right, that was Joe's beat, Home Alone. Got Joe Pesci with fire on his head. Always love that movie. Oh, Joe is here. How's it going, Joe? Nice work on these drums, Joe. Nice groovy bass line. I really like all the attention to detail. All the background sounds mixed with the perk loop are great. This is great. My bass might be a bit too loud at certain points, though. So yeah, with my takeaway with this beat, amazing. Gigi says amazing sound selection on this. A subtle synth in the back is a great addition. So yeah, my takeaway is that great job of creating that bass line. Again, we have the percussion loop, and then we have the bass line, and this. Yeah, you can hear just with how intricate the bass line is that this is the sort of my thinking with the assignment, where the percussion loop and the bass line are just going to be very dense and very heavy in the beat. The Phantom says, nice sounds. I would try to break up the bass to give audio breaks intermittently. I like the feel of it. Great song. Interesting idea there. Jay Shady, the drums are fantastic. Bassline got me from the start. Really like the grimy synth ear candy. All the sounds felt intentional and worked well together. So I think my takeaway with this beat is that, I think it's like the fourth time I said that. Once again, the bassline's great. The percussion loop's great. I think the sound outside of that, the main sound, could have filled up a little bit more space. So that sort of strange vocal sound. So as of right now, we have these patterns that take up a lot of room rhythmically, but obviously percussion is going to fill up a small frequency space. The bass line is going to fill up its particular frequency space, and I do think that sort of vocal sound there, that's sort of going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it needs to fill up a little bit more room, I would say, just merely by bringing up the volume, maybe having it take up a little bit more stereo space. Just because as of right now, it does feel a little bit more quiet. It sounds very mono as well. So I think just taking that and getting it to fill up a little bit more space could have helped the beat, just because during the hook, when you brought in a lot more sounds, like once we got to this part, that's when the beat really felt a little bit more full, just because you added a few more sounds layers that sat in all those missing pockets in the frequency space. So I think just sort of reorganizing the beat and getting that main sound of yours to fill up a little bit more room, and then having those new sounds come in during the hook, be less upfront, and have those be a little bit more of the detail sounds by removing or minimizing how much space they take up. I think the overall beat balance could have been a little bit better if so. Phantom had a really interesting point, which is to break up the bass line to give breaks intermittently. That could really help the arrangement as well. But I really do like how you went the extra distance with that, the hook. Coming up with multiple patterns at work, especially with such a bouncy bass line that's very musical. You were able to take multiple new sounds here, especially that synth. I really like that synth. And you were able to get the beat to still make sense and sound cohesive. So that was really, really impressive. Yeah, I think that's, what did I write down here? Yeah, so the beat started to feel a little bit more full during the hook. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway. I think good use of sounds. I think full during the hook. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway. I think good use of sounds. I think just expanding how much space that main sound outside of the bass and the percussive loop kind of helped the beat feel a little bit more full outside of the hook, but then during the hook it did feel full at this point. But again, if you had to rearrange the beat, you'd probably have to minimize how big those or how much space those new sounds take up. But really impressive what you did with that hook there. That was really encouraging. Joe, I think you're making progress there. That's something that I don't think you would have been able to do initially from the first beats that you submitted, but coming up with that intricate of a hook and being able to add so many different layers into your beat that all make sense and sit in the beat at a balanced spot, I think it's very encouraging to see. Awesome job there, man. Let's spin it up. Up next, we have... Is it Gigi? Oh, it is. Gigi's smiling cheek to cheek right now. Did I highlight Joe? I did not. So Gigi said he had to leave early, but he's getting his beat reviewed, so he's real happy about this. Let's take a listen to his beat, The Valley. All right, that's Gigi's beat, The Valley. Let's see what the chat is saying here. This swell is awesome. I want it, says Red Octane. Feels a bit thin, empty after the thick swell, so it feels like something's missing. I love how much the intro kept me guessing and wanting more. I love the spatial variety on the drums. This is so tasty. Love the dusty drum break fill. Maybe add a little bit more reverb and delay to the 3-note synth line to fill up a bit more space. I was thinking the same. It's such a thin song in comparison to the others. I think the pad helped a lot. I feel like there was, if there was one playing during the thin parts, that would have helped. Neptune style, that's definitely something that I picked up on as well. Very cool vibe. So I think with the beat here, I've been toying with the idea of trying to work on a game soundtrack. So I'm curious if that's the kind of intention with this beat, with all the different sections. I picked up on that sort of feel of like, it almost felt like a Neptune's Pharrell type of beat right away, because it had that sort of sparseness to it, the sort of minimal feeling, with the very dry guitar-ish sounds. And like the cool musical intermissions of like those these little inserts of like in the drum fill and like all those cool sounds definitely helped as well. Overall, it did feel a bit thin. I'm trying to figure out why. So for the main hook, I think overall it's a lack of musicality. So we have the bass line playing those 2 notes, and we have that guitar playing 3 notes. Like I think a bouncy bass line every once in a while, or maybe even taking that percussive sound in the back. That one right there, instead of having it play the same note over and over again, creating some musical pattern. I think this is something I talked about with the Neptune's video or the Pharrell video that I put out, I think it was last week, how he'll take percussive sounds like that and use them in a musical way. And I think that is sort of what is a bit lacking with this part of the beat, which is that it just needs a little bit more musicality. I think I get the idea of it being very thin and very sparse, but the sort of core, the sort of fundamentals are a bit lacking in that it has a good amount of rhythm for sure with the hi-hat pattern, but it does need a little bit more in terms of musicality. Later on in the beat, we have additional sounds being added. And while this does help, I mean, with this part of the beat right here, you can hear we have very long extended notes being played. It does help a little bit with musicality, but it doesn't feel quite as full. I did feel as though once we had that really fast moving arpeggio that was very musical, that really helped introduce a good amount of musicality towards the end here. Like just getting it to sit in a little bit different space could have helped, but nonetheless, this amount of musicality I think helped the beat. And yeah, like the arrangement was a bit confusing. It was very unconventional, and that the hook was very, very prolonged. And I'm not sure exactly what the hook is, what the verse is, just because it's structured a bit differently. I'm not sure to the point of what Red Octane mentioned. Maybe it's like a video game soundtrack. That could make a bit of sense. Gigi says, I kind of backed myself into corner when making this. I couldn't find any background texture to slot in without it clashing. Interesting. So I guess when you start the beat, you have the first layer the hi-hats. Was this even a percussion loop from the chorus pack? But you had the bass line there that you could have used in a little bit more of a musical way if you felt a little bit back in the corner. Yeah, I think that is probably the main thing that I would mention. Just think about the musicality of all your patterns. You have a very simple bass pattern, and then you have a little bit more complex, but it's still a relatively simple guitar pattern there, and it's really dry as well. And so you still have a lot of space to fill up in this beat, both in terms of, you know, the depth and the frequency, but as well as like what you can do with your patterns. There's a lot of simplicity in this beat, which inherently isn't a bad thing, but a little bit more complexity with like even one extra sound could have gone a long way, which is exactly what the sort of arpeggio here helped with. So yeah, I think just taking that one extra step to think about how you can add like one more complex pattern that fills up space in the beat could have gotten the beat to feel a little bit more full, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm curious, was this actually a percussion loop from the course pack? Was there just like a raw hi-hat pattern like that? I don't know. Who's up next? It's Jay Shiggity. Everyone who's in the chat's getting selected. Good job, guys. Let's highlight GG. Let's move on to Jay Shiggity here. Super Jank is the beat name. Let's take a listen. That was Super Jank by Jay Shiggity. Interesting, unique idea there. It was all programmed. I refrained from using a loop for the most part. Okay, gotcha. Something Danny Brown would rap on. Chack, what does that mean? Nice breakdown. The switch up on sounds halfway through is lovely, says NDN Man. NDNM. Wait, what? What did I just say? NDN Man. Love the vibe and switch up from the kind of off-kilter rhythm, says John Sherby. I like the atmospheric vibe of it and especially love the last part. So yeah, with this beat, there's a really cool amount of detail. I love the ending. Wish we saw that earlier on, says Red Octane. A really cool ending as well, but a really cool amount of detail in the beat. What I really liked was how space was filled up. So you guys could hear that there was like an automation on the reverb. It's just that's a really unique way of filling up this sort of background depth in the middle ground in a way that doesn't have to exist for the entirety of the beat. You just have this sound coming in and out that really does the job of filling up the depth in the beat. So you can hear it if I play it again. So you can hear it sort of swells in and then it cuts off immediately. Just a really smart way to use automation and reverb there. Jay Shiggity says, I'm going to run with the last part for a separate beat. And yeah, I think a really smart way to fill up space and great job of filling up space on the hook as well when you added yet another layer in. So you did a lot of different patterns here. As you can hear, you introduced, it sounds like a couple of new sounds, but you also took the stop and go feeling of the patterns during the verse here. And then you really had them extend to fill up a lot more space during the hook. Say just merely changing the length of your notes. It sounds like the bass line there especially can go a long way in filling up a lot of room in your beat. So if you have like a very short, punchy bass line for the hook, if you're trying to figure out ways to fill up more room and make the hook sound bigger, just literally playing the exact same sounds that you have and just extending the notes so they're longer. Really great way of making the beat sound full. The way that you added those additional layers and you played with stereo spacing and have them move like left to right, really smart as well. I think you're doing a lot of really smart stuff in here. The swing was a bit drastic in my opinion. Sounds like using a 30% swing according to the description. A bit over the top for my own personal liking. And I actually really agree with Core. I really like this sort of the sort of industrial, very aggressive type of feel to that part. I really like that as well. I would try to keep the change up though. That switch up is nice. I love the panning on the super saws for that section. So yeah, really smart, really cool ideas going on here. And I think you did exactly what the assignment asked for. We have like these shakers that take up a lot of room, and we have this intricate bass line that you did a good job of, again, just like not having it flood the entire beat. Just because that's the second layer in your beat doesn't mean it has to take up the entirety of the beat itself. You really sort of truncated a lot of the notes, and then you, again, brought them to be full length during the hook. So yeah, just a really smart beat here that has a lot of good going on in it. Don't really feel as though there's much to say in terms of negativity. It sounds like you experimented with turning up this swing to be a pretty crazy amount. Typically, I probably wouldn't go that extreme just because it did feel a bit off kilter, as much as I do like that idea at the end here. Like the kick pattern there feels like very, very off in my opinion. I think I would have liked something that's a little bit more controlled, but that's just me. Yeah, really smart job of completing this assignment. You did a good job of filling up a lot of spaces in a really awesome way. That swing. All right, let's highlight Shiggity Man, and let's move on to the next beat, which is from the K-Man, the K-Hole. Let's jump in to, would it be Kalo? Is that how it's pronounced? Fueled by Caffeine. Here we go.
It's Caffeine on the track.
was Fueled by Caffeine. We got a nice little trap beat there. What is Beat Scholar? Is that a plugin or something? I love that perk loop, but I feel it may be a little too loud since it pans around, a little distracting. This is great though. Catchy arrangement, nice rhythm, vibe, and cinematic feel to it. I could definitely see this being used for a movie. I don't know which loop you used. I think I tried to use that one initially. For me, I didn't pick up on the percussion loop until like closer to the end there. It was a bit hard to pick up. Where am I here? Right, you can hear it panning there. I see what you're saying. Red Octane. The melody is great. There's something with the space usage of your bass. If I were you, I would have made it that wet in intro and a lot more dry for the actual beat. In the beginning, I thought all that reverb was coming from the bass. This is a very interesting bridge between smooth hip hop and industrial. Again, let's get Boys to Men meets negative type O negative vibes. Yeah, it does really have that sort of R&B-ish feel to it now that you mention it. That sort of old school 90s R&B. Sorry, what are you guys saying about the bass has reverb on it? Let me play back here. Maybe it was my mic or something.
It's
Good ear, guys. I didn't even pick up on that. So it did sound as though the reverb, maybe it was the entirety of the the bass has some reverb on it. I didn't even notice that either, guys. So for me with this beat, so first off, it sounds like that percussion loop was used and it had a lot of panning. And then the bass came in with a good amount of musicality. And I think what Caffeine did here with the other layers and instruments in the beat was really well put together. So like I mentioned before, we're always going to need a good amount of musicality in the beat. And I feel as though with the bass line being a little bit more intricate in the beat here, and then we have that relatively simple bell pattern, but even though it's just a few notes, that's really all you need. He didn't go like over the top and try to force a crazy elaborate bell pattern after that. We just have something straightforward, but it really pushes the song forward and really helps the idea, the sort of core loop come together. And then we have that synth that's a little bit more in the background, not as dominant. That really helps create a little bit more musicality as well. Crowtown says, it's a good idea. It just fills up a lot of space. The perk loop just blended in and tricked my brain. So yeah, with the bass, like you guys mentioned, it did make it a little bit muddy. I do like the idea, but was it necessary? I probably would have just added a little bit more distortion maybe if the idea is to get the mid or the low mids of the bass to fill up a little bit more room and be a little bit more dominant in the beat. Maybe just adding a little bit more color or EQing it rather than using a reverb on it could have been a good idea, just because this idea wouldn't be as bad if it was just a little bit more of a simple bass pattern. But since you have a lot of movement with the bass pattern, there are times when like the tail end of the reverb from one note is gonna start to interfere with the next bass note, and you have this sort of muddiness that sometimes occurs because of it. So yeah, that was a really good pickup that you guys mentioned. GG, see you. Hopefully you had a good stream. So yeah, that's one thing. And I do think the percussion loop, I don't think would have been as distracting had the core drum pattern in the beat been as over the top. I do feel as though a little bit of simplification for the actual drum pattern could have helped, just because there's just like a lot of stutters and a lot of like repeated snares, so you guys can hear again. So yeah, I just feel as though a simplification of the drum pattern, just because, you know, you have this percussion loop and it's obviously adding its own rhythm, and then we have like tons of stutters and rolls and like these sort of fills with the snares. I don't think that amount of intricacy with the drum pattern was necessary. I think a little bit of simplification could have helped the beat be a little bit more usable if it was for an artist, just because I think they would probably struggle with just how much rhythm's going on in the beat. But overall, I really, really like the core idea here. Just a smart use of sounds and smart way of building all the patterns. So yeah, that was like the core idea of what I had in my mind with the assignment, which is you have this percussion loop that is gonna add a lot of rhythm into your beat. Then ideally with a second layer, just because it's your first musical layer that you have in your beat, you're gonna be a little bit more intricate, which is exactly what Caffeine did. And then what he did afterwards with the bell pattern and that secondary synth was perfectly in line with what you probably would need to do. Just build something that's still musical, but relatively a little bit more simple. So a really awesome job, Caffeine. It's just those small little details with what you did with some of the sounds and some of the over complexity with the rhythm could have just been a little bit more controlled. Overall, I think this is an awesome beat, and I think it would be awesome to hear like an actual rapper on that. Had it be a little bit more simple, I think it would have worked very well. Let's spin it up. I think we'll get through all the beats today. We got Jesse Too Hazy. He's been coming in with some dominant performances the last few weeks here. Let's take a listen to what he's come up with this week with his beat. All right, we got Jesse's beat there. I love that little sound there. Was that from the Course Pack? That's a really cool sound. The ambience on this is dope. Love this. Great bounce, thick bass. The texture work is super lush without overcrowding. And then the piano comes in and elevates. Great work. Captures the spooky vibe very well. A great vibe and full sound. Could easily hear an aggressive vocal over this. Bell that comes in halfway is a great touch, says Crowtown. Yeah, definitely agree with all you guys. I think this is an awesome beat. I love the sort of core sound. That detuned synth was such a smart, cool way to just fill up space and just have that be the sort of central sound in the beats. Just really added to that spookiness. The dark piano and the woo-woo sound is a great texture. Yeah, I love that woo-woo. I love the bass, but it feels like it might overtake some of the instrumentation. I don't think it's too loud. I think some sounds are too quiet. Was great though. That's interesting. So let's take a quick listen again. I feel, well, I guess like the woo-woo sound could have been a little bit louder. I would have liked to hear that a little bit more. I do think the piano that came partway through was a bit quiet. Like the sort of, I think it might be that a lot of the sounds are sitting in the sort of low, mid, and mid, and so that piano could have cut through a little bit more easily if some of the higher frequencies were accentuated a little bit more, maybe with some bit crushing or just some simple EQing. I don't think the bass itself was a little bit dominant. I just think many of the sounds sat in that lower frequency, which I like. That's not a bad thing by any means, but if the piano needed some help to cut through, maybe just shifting the frequency presence a little bit. Great sound and style, enjoyable for sure, smooth and relaxing. So yeah, I really love the small percussive details, like I mentioned. The piano really helped introduce a little bit of musicality. Again, if it would have been a little bit more loud and probably a little bit more present throughout the beat, it was just sort of saved for the very tail end. I think having something a little bit more musical like that pattern, like that piano come, every 4 bars, or, maybe a shorter truncated pattern like that come in every 2 bars. It doesn't have to be throughout the entire loop by any means. It could have just helped with a little bit of musicality, just because the bass pattern, it's not over the top in musicality, and that sort of core synth is very, very monotone. So just having some sound come in that was a little bit more musical, a pattern that came that was a little bit more musical every once in a while could have been a welcomed amount of variation. Goddamn Google Drive. But what's interesting is that percussion loop that was used here does have a little bit of musicality to it. So I also think that does help in getting the beat to feel full. So when you listen to some of the beats from before, how I mentioned, like I asked some of you guys whether you used a percussion loop, and some of you guys just use like a raw hi-hat pattern instead of a percussion loop like this. And I think that's one difference that sort of stands out now that I think about it, which is that this percussion loop here, you can sort of natively hear that different sort of notes and it are used. It's not as if it's the same tonality, the same note over and over again with this percussion loop. And that's also an advantage of using the percussion loops like this, which some of them, not all of them, but some of them do contribute to a little bit of that musicality. But if you just use like a raw hi-hat and you play a very intricate pattern, yes, you do add a lot of rhythm, but you sort of miss out on that added benefit of a little bit of musicality. And I think that's why Jesse's beat here worked, even if for the most part it was not as musical as some of the other beats during this section. Like we have so much small detail with the percussion and with the rhythmic elements that were used in a little bit of, or have musical characteristics to them, that the beat did not feel monotone because of it. So I think now that I think about it, that is what was a big difference between Jesse's beat and some of the other ones that did not. They went to forego a percussive loop like this, and they sort of depended on their own hi-hat pattern. And I think that, now that I think about it, is a big difference maker. So yeah, awesome beat here, Jesse. I think as usual, I don't really have much to say, and if I did, it would be a little bit of a nitpick. I love hearing Jesse's beats, and if this was submitted, like a beat like this was submitted for the next competition, I mean, this could be a potential competition-winning beat here. That was really awesome. Jesse's always bringing it. I'd love to hear what Jesse's doing. He doesn't come around the streams much, but I wonder if he's selling beats or what he's up to. Because I definitely think that's like, that'd be an awesome beat to hear like a aggressive artist over. Crowtown's up next. Congratulations, Crowtown. Let's hear what you got for us. Crowtown beats Basie the Jazzy Dude. Awesome job there. The bass is, I love the intro bass line starting off the energy high. I love the bass line on this. Jumped right in, those flutes. This goes hard with that bass line. That switch up, chef's kiss. The drums are so thick. What is happening on the right? Is that a rock mixing trick I'm hearing? Drums focused on the left. Room reverb sent to the right. I love it. Whatever it is, says Jay Shiggity. So yeah, just a lot of attention to detail here. It was, what was the percussion loop? I'm trying to listen here. Huh. I'm not sure what the percussion loop is, but nonetheless, really, really awesome job with that bass line. I really love the progression that you built there. And I think the way the core loop was built was really smart as well. And that you have this sort of downwards bass line, which is really creating the progression in the beat. And then you have a shorter, a little bit more repetitive, it sounds like a kalimba. But that's not a bad thing by any means. Like you have the bass line creating the overall progression in the mood of the beat, and the kalimba being used to, you know, introduce some musicality as well, but it's not, again, it's not over the top with how musical it is. It's just a few notes being used repetitiously, but that's all you really need. I think that's a really smart way to reel it in and not get too crazy with that sound and that pattern. I think that was really smartly done from the Batcher pack. What was the actual sound itself though? Was it just like that noise that was used? I'm not sure. All the textures were great, but I felt the panning was almost a bit overwhelming and hectic, but also amazing. Says Red Octane. So yeah, I love the way all the loop was constructed. Really, really smart and really, really well done. The drum pattern was great as well. I think everything really fit in. Really impressed with the hook. You added like a lot of additional layers during the hook, but everything worked very, very well. You can hear just so much small detail, so much effort that was put in, and I think it really, really translated and it really sounds impressive. With the next challenge, the idea is going to be to do a similar challenge or the similar assignment to what we did before, which is I'm going to ask you guys to add a vocal onto your beat. And I think with this beat, this would probably be a really helpful test just because Too Wet Red Octane mentioned the sort of amount of noise and panning. I think probably it would have been a hard time for an artist to use this if that is the intention. So first off, there was a lot of bit crushing that was used. It really helped the beat feel a lot more full, but nonetheless, once a vocal would have been added, it would have been very difficult. And I think that's what also accentuated like all that noise and how apparent it was in that it had some extreme panning. I think it's just simply reducing how much crushing there was and then like reducing the volume of that, the noise and all the sound. Easy fix. I just think that with the amount of like additional noise, it probably would have been difficult for an artist to use this. So it depends on what Crowtown's intention is, but again, it's a simple fix. In terms of the actual technique and the actual construction of the beat, very, very impressive. I think you're doing an incredible job here, Crowtown. Yeah, like the use of noise, it's a very smart way to do it. Really, really awesome. And it really does go a long way in getting the beat to sound full. I think just to the level that it was highlighted in the beat is more so what I'm pointing out here. My head's not even on screen. I need to shift over here. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, awesome job, Crowtown. That was very beautiful. It really reminds me of like a almost modern day beat from Illmatic. Like if Illmatic was remade, was the beat that Q-Tip made? Was it Memory Lane? I don't know. No, it's not Memory Lane. I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it feels like a old school boom bap with like modern day technique and sound. That was awesome. Just a VST plugin, the excellent tone and programming. This was just for the assignment, and thank you. Fair enough. I think you probably know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of if this was used for an artist. So I'm confident in you. One Love, that's what I'm thinking about. Yes, with the kalimba pattern there. The Phantom's up next. Let's go. Phantom.
Phantom.
right, that was Phantom's first beat submission, as he said. Red Octane's got a boogie. It was good having you. Thank you for showing up once again, man. If you're considering those beat breakdown vids from members, I hope we're getting closer to that happening. Would love to see that project file from who exactly? From Crowtown. That would be interesting as well. That could be an interesting idea. Beat submission number 1. Nice, dark, minimal, very moody. I love the dark piano and ear candy. The title of it's perfect. Love the delay and reverb work on the drums and perk. Definitely some fantastic ambience. This is awesome. Would love the percussion with some delay to be a bit more in the background during beat down times, says Crowtown. So yeah, I definitely feel like what you guys are saying coincides with what I'm feeling. Awesome feel to this beat. Very dark and very moody. I think the way Phantom put his beats together, put his loop together here was really smartly done. So we just have a good amount of layering, which is really impressive as well. It's not as though this beat was made up of like 1 or 2 sounds. He did a really awesome job in creating the loop by hand. It's, I would say, with regards to the assignment, it didn't really sound like there was like a core rhythmic loop in this beat. It was mostly himself that made the percussive sounds. I'm not sure why this is not working. So we do have like these unique percussion sounds, but I don't think that would be a percussive loop by any means. In terms of the way that the beat's constructed, again, I love the musicality and all the patterns. I do feel as though it would have been nice if there was like a core POI sound that was selected. Like, what is the main sound? And taking all the other elements and really making them a little bit more secondary. So to me, it sounds like the piano would be like the main sound, and I think you did a really great job of creating this really beautiful pattern with it. I think a lot of the other sounds around it were just made a little bit too dominant. So just like what Crowtown says, that percussive sound with delay on it, it would have been nice if that was a little bit more in the background, but again, it was made very loud and very upfront. There's also another sound in here. I believe it's like a bell. So like when those sounds are playing individually, everything sounds great. But once you start blending all like 3 different layers together, it sounds like it feels as though there's like a lot of fighting. So what I would probably do is just, again, think about what I mentioned in the course of like, what's your POI, and sort of create the beat around that, as opposed to trying to like stuff as many sounds as possible and making everything as loud as possible. A lot of the times you'll just get sounds fighting with each other, and especially with how much reverb and how like moody this beat is, we just have like a lot of sounds just like bleeding into one another, and just feeling a little bit starts to take away from like what makes the beat special, just because there's so many different sounds like fighting at that point. If you were to do this sort of arrangement where you have like one sound come in and be the POI, and then another sound come in later on, and like that sound dropping out, I'll probably use like automation to really control the volume of each layer, just so you don't have those sounds fighting with each other. But yeah, the way the beat was constructed, the way the loop was constructed, the arrangement, really, really awesome work, Phantom. It's really encouraging to see how good you are right off the bat. I think just those small details would have been nice. And yeah, I don't know whether this beat followed the assignment per se, just because it didn't really feel as though there was a percussion loop, and the bass line was relatively simple, which obviously if you're making a beat's not the worst thing. I just thought it would have been a little bit more intricate if these were the layers that the beat started with. Yeah, really awesome idea there, Phantom. Interested to see some of your beats, listen to some of your beats going forward. Cool. Let's keep spinning. 6 more beats to go. We'll definitely get through them, and then we'll put an end to it. Another first timer here. We have Sharp. His first submission. Let's take a listen to Sharp's beat here, called Purple Lawnmower. That was Sharp's first submission. A newer Beatmaker here, of course. Purple Lawnmower is the beat name. So let's highlight you and let's see what you're saying. Jay Shiggity says, I've never even considered a predictable outcome for this assignment. That's been blowing my mind since the start of the stream. John Sherby, very West Coast. The main rhythm sounds like lowriders hitting switches. Has an unorthodox feel. Definitely a very unique soundscape here. Awesome work. There's something with the volumes. Would have loved for drums to fill up more. This is giving me an animated laboratory at work vibe. All the beakers and Bunsen burners bouncing in sync with the beat. So yeah, I think you guys are picking up on a lot of what I'm picking up. Again, Sharp is his first submission, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. A little bit, it's a difficult assignment to be subjected to for your first one ever, just because it's really reworks your brain and forces you to think of your beat in a little bit of a different way. I'll put the arrangement aside for now. I think what Sharp could think about with the loop construction is that what I heard, to the point of what Jay Shiggity mentioned, there's like a lot of unique sounds and interesting ideas in the beat that have like cool effects, and like I get the feeling that Sharp has a really interesting, unique sound selection. I think when it comes to creating the patterns for the beat, I think that's where the focus should be going forward. So just like I mentioned in the course, so the Phantom says, I like the bass on it, nice sound. Some of those additional sounds could use some reverb and sound balancing. So like I mentioned in the course, whenever you build a pattern, think about like, how complex are my other sounds right now? What are the patterns doing, and what can I create that would fit well with that? The same thing when you're choosing a sound as well. What I feel with this beat is that there's like a lot of novelty, a lot of sounds being thrown in just because they're cool and they're sort of used like a little bit repetitiously. And that is how the beat sort of has value, in that there's just like a lot of unique, interesting ideas and sounds. But is that what the beat needs? Are all the spaces filled? Are all the patterns balancing with one another? And so it'll have that be your guiding sort of principle. Again, all this is explained in the first section of the course. So whenever you're making a pattern, instead of thinking, I'm just going to grab this sound, it sounds interesting, it sounds wacky, move away from what sounds interesting beyond like the first few layers and start moving into, what does the beat need now? Does it need yet another like wacky sound, or maybe is there a space that needs filling right now? Just like the Phantom mentioned, some of the sounds could use some reverb and sound balancing. So always think about, I have my first initial sound in this beat. What does the beat need rather than what do I just want to force in just because it sounds interesting and unique. So I think we'll keep the rest of the beat aside for now. I don't want to get into like arrangement and all that stuff just because the first thing I always want to focus on with newer members is can they construct a loop that is balanced and the sound selection works. So I think that's what I'm going to leave with Sharp. The first section of the course is going to be really, really helpful in helping you understand how to choose the right sound as opposed to just, forcing a multitude of sounds just because and wondering why your beat still doesn't sound full. It's oftentimes just thinking about the spaces that are filled and like what the patterns are doing in terms of their musicality and the rhythm. So keep that in mind for the next submission, my friend. Let's listen to Anomalous is up next. All right. Everyone's getting chosen except Jay Sherb. I think I remember that happening a couple of times. Sherb was unfortunately left until the end a few times. It's not fair. But then again, the wheel never is. So let's take a listen to Anomalous' beat, Perk Loop, Djembe Drama. Here we go. That is Anomalous' beat. We've got an orchestral sample here. Alright, Sherby says, is a bit droning, but the strings give it a cinematic feel. Phantom says, reminds me of MF Doom King Ghidorah, nice style. Love the Dusty sampling feel. The sample juggling is cool, but it feels a little disjointed. I feel like I keep losing sight of the downbeat, says Jay Shiggity. I agree that a little bit more structure would help greatly, says Phantom. Say with me, my takeaway with this beat is I really like the actual core sample that was used. I always enjoy sort of orchestral samples, and the sample itself, it had a good amount of rhythm to it. It wasn't as if it was just like one long string or anything. fast forward a bit. So yeah, good chops there. I think the core loop that was built using that sample worked. You have like the first half of the bar, first half of the loop that has a little bit more rhythm, and then you have that long extended note in the second half. I liked this part of the sort of beat, but then what was used later on did feel a little bit disjointed, just like Jay Shiggity mentioned there. When what the technique was after that was just to take the same chop and then re-pitch it to different pitches. I did not feel as though that worked as well, just because some of those notes just felt a bit off. I would have liked if a different part of the sample itself was used at the exact same pitch. Nonetheless, I think what else is missing in this beat was that you could hear the way the percussive loop was used was that it was pitched down quite a bit. And so I think what remained was that we have the kick and the snare and the sample, and none of those sounds really filled up the higher end. So I think just a simple hi-hat pattern could have helped as well. Just because you have a percussive loop doesn't mean you're instantly going to replace that with a hi-hat. You still need to think about what space that percussive loop fills up, just because, you know, there are percussive loops that are just like toms, and there's percussive loops that fill up different frequency spaces. And with the way that this percussive loop was used, that it seemingly was pitched down, and so it filled up a lower frequency space, which, you know, it's not a bad thing, but you still need to think about what spaces need to be filled in this particular beat. And it feels as though the higher end doesn't have much in it, because we have no hi-hat, or the percussive loop that was used did not sit in that space. This junk Google Drive. So yeah, I think the snare has a good amount of high end, but I still think something that's a little bit more routinely used to fill up that high end space would have been nice. Really nice stereo spread on that initial perk loop. Yeah, I think that was a good way to fill up stereo space. It's a good point, Jay Shiggity. I just think the frequency is commonly like the most important thing that you need to think about to get your beat to sound full. And I do feel as though just having that lack of a sound up in that space made this beat feel a little bit incomplete. But nonetheless, I really like the way the sample is used, and I really like the chops, especially for the core loop. I think the arrangement could have done something with a little bit more straightforward, with some additional chops for another section, as opposed to like this sort of up and down chop. It did feel as though it was a little bit disjointed with the repitching, just like Jay Shiggity mentioned. But yeah, really cool sampling job there. Anomalous. So he said the assignment lacks cohesiveness. Busy man. He's month 15 into a 3-month remodeling project. That is wild. Hopefully he has more time to work on beats, so you can see him around here more often. MF Swoon is up next. Jay Sherb, who's got money down? Is he going to be the last one, or will he be chosen earlier? Swoon is up next. We will get to you, though. Don't worry. That was Swoon, Nosebleed, an industrial trap-esque beat. We heard both of those influences in there. That bass getting futuristic vibes. Dude said percussion loop and bass line. Hold my beer. Really nice job. The drum is cool, but it feels a bit too repetitive. The rest of the sounds all work together to make more an interesting beat. I thought the drums were going to be a lead in at first. I'm really craving some hi-hats. I really like the arrangement of all the other sounds though. The switch up was a nice change of pace and not so intense as the original drums. What a satisfying beat section. West coasting again. Yeah, definitely agree with you guys. I think we're all spot on, feeling the exact same thing. Initially, the beat felt way too sparse and way too minimal with like the very intro here. And of course, with industrial beats, like they are going to be a little bit more monotonous and aggressive, but I think even to this degree, it felt a little bit lacking in primarily because of the drums. So I think with this type of technique, you have no hi-hats and the drums, the kick and the snare are primarily what's driving the rhythm, and you're using them just way more often because of that. I mean, again, it doesn't really sound like there was any percussion loop, and the bass wasn't helping create any rhythm either, and those are like really the only elements in this beat at this point. So if you're gonna have the drums, like the kick and the snare, have this much sort of focus put on them, I think just doing things like adding some variation in velocity, or like taking the drum sounds themselves and creating multiple different versions of them that have slightly different textures, just to make the drum pattern sound a little bit more interesting, just because as of right now it's just the same two notes back and forth. Even the kick doesn't have much color on it either, and so like the most of the sort of driving elements here are going to be the snare in terms of what we can actually hear. Jay Shiggity says, love that cranked feedback outro. But once we get to the other section of the beat that has a little bit more going on in it, like the hook section here that has that sort of bell sound on top of it. And then we had that growling bass come in. The drums don't feel as in focus, and so that problem gets masked a little. And the same thing happens once we have the hi-hat come in later on. And then we have the West Coast whistle come in as well. So yeah, I think this beat, it has some good things going on. And once everything comes together during the hook sections of the beat, I think the beat feels a little bit more full and complete and interesting. But I think the parts outside of that, a little bit more detail needs to be done and to get the beat to actually feel full and actually not sound as repetitive and as bare. And honestly, like just using a percussion loop here probably would have been a big help, instead of just having a kick and a snare really drive all the rhythm down. Yeah, like this would be a perfect opportunity to have like a really unique like hi-hat percussion loop, something that has like a lot of movement in it. But I'm not sure why it wasn't used here. A missed opportunity by Swoon with that one, but once the beat did come together and started to pick up, I sort of got the sense that the beat started to work at that point. All right, is Sherb gonna be chosen? Let's see. Oh, no. It is Z-Lock this time. We have Jay Sherb. He's gonna have a 50-50 shot next time, though. I like those odds. Z-Lock is up next. And the final two beats after that. Let's take a listen to Swingin' by Z-Lock. That was Swingin' by Z-Lock. Very nice Southern drumline vibes. The vibe is so nice. Put a little low pass on the initial perk loop and we're golden. Love the horns. I completely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. Very uplifting feel. Maybe a pass on the main horn to switch it up a little would have been good. So I think the way the beat was constructed here, Joe says, I feel like the perk loop started to muddy the beat once everything else comes in. Man, this really feels like if Art Crumb put out Steamboat Willie. Isn't Art Crumb that perverted cartoonist or something? Who's Art Crumb again? So yeah, I think I really like the way the beat was sort of layered, especially you have like that core horn and then we have the horns that come in during the hook, and then we have like that big 808 pattern. It really did feel like a very uplifting southern type of feel. I do agree that once everything did come in, the perk loop started to feel a little bit muddy. Phantom says definitely has swing to it. Would have liked to seen a bit more changes too. Yeah, like once everything came together, I think just the amount of space that perk loop took up was a bit overwhelming. Maybe just putting it into mono could have been an idea, and then having the horns be a little bit more stereo just to reposition everything could have been an idea. Overall, yeah, it did feel as though it could have used a little bit more in terms of like a change every once in a while, just because that core loop, goddamn Google Drive, the core loop did get a little bit repetitious. Like, I'm not sure where that sample was gotten from, but maybe just taking like another little piece and just having it come in every 4 bars or something could have been a nice little switch up. But yeah, the way the beat was constructed, nice amount of layering, good amount of musicality and rhythm, especially during the hook with that additional horn riff coming in. Yeah, I think the main thing that I would say is I agree with you guys in that the percussion loop ended up taking a little bit too much room by the end of it. So either repositioning what frequency spaces it takes up or the stereo space, I think could have been a good idea to have a better balance in the beat. But yeah, overall it felt like a nice little down south drumline type of beat. I'm really slumping in my chair here. All right. Need that good back posture. 50-50 chance. Let's see who wins. Baduk or the Sherb. Oh, Jay Sherb, you did it. You did not come in last. Congratulations. Huge win. Got Jay Sherb, WTF. Let's take a listen to this beat. That was Sherb's beat there. That better be the title of your next loop pack. Goddamn Google Drive. It's gonna be on my tombstone. So I got most of it done last week, but I didn't get a chance to finish it with everything going on. Still need some mixing and maybe a baseline change. Didn't get to get to the smaller details. I feel like this beat had a lot of small details that was really awesome. Sparseness and call and response done right. Love the panning on that shaker. I may bring down that clave. I've been told that's how it's pronounced. It's not clave, it's clave. Or am I being an idiot? I don't know. During the main beat, nice work. John Sherby, says the Phantom. Like the sample arrangement and sound choices were solid. Yeah, I think Sherb's done a phenomenal job here with such a unique amount of layering. Like, I think that's the most impressive part. The amount of sounds and the amount of layering, everything's sitting on top of each other and everything's still sounding balanced was phenomenal. All the spaces in the beat for the most part were filled and everything felt cohesive. Great amount of musicality. I think this was I think the assignment influence really came through in that the percussion loop was like the driving force for the beginning of the beat, and then we have this more bouncy bass line come in, and we also had like multiple bass textures from the sounds of it. That was impressive. Good use of stereo space. I think the one thing I would say is that there was a little bit of a lack of dry sounds. Like, everything had a good amount of reverb. Everything felt a little bit floaty, but I think just having something to ground the beat would have helped. So from the sounds of it, we didn't have like a dominant kick, and we did not have a dry snare or clap. The clap had a lot of reverb on it, and I feel like that was what made the beat feel a little bit more floaty. So just merely adding something a little bit more dry to really help with the drum pattern could have brought the beat. So yeah, we have this very large clap that's a little bit reverby. We don't really have like a kick that's cutting through. So I think just those two elements, having something a little bit more dry just to really ground the beat could have helped, and then having everything else be the very ethereal sounds in the background. I think that could have been a little bit of a better balance, because as of right now, I think that's like the only space that was missing. Everything else was awesome, and everything was really well put together. Good amount of musicality and rhythm. I think you knocked it out of the park here, Sherb. That was really impressive with just how much detail you put into this beat, even though you feel like you didn't put much detail. It definitely felt like it to me, especially with how you used percussion as well, having that clave be a little bit melodic. My kick was maybe too subby and didn't have enough color. Yeah, kick could definitely use a little bit more presence punch. Yeah, I think just having a little bit more of that thump, and then bringing some sound to be a little bit more dry. Maybe you want to bring another percussion sound in if you want to keep that clap to be very reverby and large. Nonetheless, just like Crowtown says, great work there. I think Sherb's also been crushing it recently too. A lot of you guys have been crushing it recently. Lots of progression that was made. So let's listen to this last beat here. Thank you again, by the way, for you guys sticking around, even though your beats already got heard, obviously. It's really helpful to still have you guys hang out, critique these beats with me, just because you guys pick up on a lot of things that I don't. So it's always appreciated that you guys are down to hang out and have a fun little hangout. Badook was selected. I cannot believe it. The odds must have been astronomically low. So let's listen to Badook's beat, and then we'll vamp out for the rest of the day. Just like I mentioned, the next assignment is going to be more around vocals again. I think that's a really helpful exercise to make a beat around a vocal. And after that, in April, we're going to have our next contest where you could win hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. I'm excited for that. And yeah, more will be announced soon. Either way, let's listen to this last beat and have ourselves a nice remaining Sunday. I have a feeling Badook did not follow the instructions. Let's take a listen. Do we have a percussion loop? I don't know. got Baduke's beat here, Horror Trap. Says, does seem as though he followed instructions. Perk, loop, plus bass. Well done, Baduke. Or Babadook, as Crowtown mentioned there. So yeah, this beat a little bit experimental. So Jay Shady says this is super crunchy. Really like the drum chops. That bass line is cool, but it gets a little overwhelming to my ear. So yeah, a little bit of an experimental beat by Badook. I think the slow tape stop on the second chord here and there would have worked great. Just a tad. Great work. Good to see the different approaches people take. Very EDM, dark vibes from this. So it's very up tempo. It sounds like this was made in like 140 BPM or whatever, but it was actually put with the drums on the 2 and the 4. So we just had a lot of rhythm, a lot going on, and I'm not sure why that was. Obviously, there's a little bit of experimentation, but it did feel as though the beat, because of just how fast paced it was, didn't really leave much in terms of space. More could have been added in. We just had a sort of a lack of musicality in this beat. Maybe having a little bit more of a slow moving drone or something in here that changed, that had like musicality to it, or like some pad or something could have been nice. But for the most part, we just had a little bit more of like a simple raw beat that just had a lot of like interjections and like unique textures come in and out, but it didn't really have the amount of musicality that you typically would. It was very dark and maybe had like an aggressive feel to it. And like we have these strange like vocal samples going through. I really do like that the sort of chords that are playing on every single bar. I think that definitely did help to contribute to a little bit of musicality, but I think I would have liked a little bit more of an intricate musical pattern in here. Great job in filling up all the space though. Obviously this is like a little bit of an experimental beat, so I'm not sure whether like this is made for an artist, because it would be very difficult for an artist to actually hop on this and use it with how fast paced it is, but there's still room on it, I will say. Maybe that's the reason why there wasn't much musicality, or he didn't want to add yet another layer in here just to make sure there's like room for a vocal, just because with this much drum work and just how fast paced this is, you can't really make something that's like highly musical by any means. So I think he did a good job of like creating this balancing act, but nonetheless, whether this was even possible for an artist to get on, it's hard to say, just with how intense and how fast-paced it is. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thank you once again for showing up. I'll post up the next assignment probably tomorrow, and we'll start the preps for the contest for April. That's about it. Hopefully you guys are having a good you're gonna have the rest of the March be good for you. That would be very nice to see. And feel free to hit me up if you have any questions or anything else or concerns. Otherwise, see you guys later. Have a good Sunday, and kiss your grandma for me. See you guys. Bye bye.